one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, the purpose of this meeting is to have a public hearing, to have comments on the potential charter revision and the report that we've submitted, or not that we've submitted, that we will hope to submit at some point. What I'd like to do, Bob, if you could, can you just kind of go over the legal steps that got us here, so everybody understands how we got here? Yeah, that'd probably be best.
This commission was created by the Board of Selectmen, which gave you a charge to look at certain issues within the existing budget. You have held the initial public hearing before you started on any substantive business as required by statute. Your proceedings are governed by General Statutes Section 7-191. And you have held meetings starting with your first meeting August 31st, 2015. And you've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 meetings. I don't know. Can you hear me? Maybe if I...
Yeah, that mic is on. It is just recording for SCTV.
Oh.
It's not-
Oh, okay, thank you.
You've held 18 meetings since that date, including one public hearing. This is your second public hearing, which the statute requires you to hold prior to taking an action on your draft final report and your draft revised charter, which is now ready for your action after the public hearing. Tonight you'll hear from the public, and based on tonight's comments, you can change your draft or not change your draft. And once you vote, what will happen is if you approve your draft charter and your draft final report, it will be transmitted to the town clerk. The town clerk will then transmit it to the Board of Selectmen. And as the appointing authority, they are obligated to hold at least one public hearing on the draft report and shall not hold the last public hearing later than 45 days after submission of the draft report to such clerk. So if you were to submit your report tomorrow, they would have 45 days to hold at least one public hearing, and then to close their public hearings. After they close their public hearings, they have 15 days to make a recommendation to the commission for changes. If they don't make recommendations to the commission for changes within those 15 days, your report becomes final. Once your report is final, they have up to 15 months to certify the report to referendum. So your job is essentially complete once you take a vote on your final draft report and final draft charter and transmit it to the town clerk. That completes your work. Now they can give you more work to do if they take your draft and send it back to you, resubmit it to the commission and ask you to prepare certain changes to your draft, which you are not obligated to do. You can do it, but you're not obligated to do it. You can take one of two actions. You can amend the report as suggested by the appointing authority, in this case the Board of Selectmen, and send it back to them for consideration of your amended report, or you could look at their recommended changes and vote not to change anything and send it back to them. In either way, it's entirely up to you how to make that decision. They're not obligated to send it back to you. If they do, the Board of Selectmen is obligated to tell you what suggested changes you would like to make. If they do that, then you must meet and consider their changes, but you're not obligated to agree with their changes. So essentially, after tonight's public hearing and after you take action on your final report, your work is concluded unless the Board of Selectmen sends the report back to you for changes. Any questions on that?
Yeah, actually, if we send, let's say they send it back to us and they would like to change on a specific item, we decide we don't want to change that.
Correct.
Now send it back to the Board of Selectmen.
Correct.
What is the status at that point?
Well, they can reject a report, and then the rejected report ends right there, unless it's petitioned by the public to take the report to referendum.
Now, can they cherry pick the items?
They cannot. The only entity that can change the report is the commission.
Okay,
They can't line item
okay. So they
veto
can't say,
any of your
like,
changes.
these eight,
No,
we're not-
no. They have to take your report, suggest changes. If you decide not to make the changes, you send it back to them. They have the right to not send it on to referendum. And if they do send it on to referendum, it's the Board of Selectmen that fashions the questions for referendum based on the report.
Okay, anybody else, any other questions?
Well, I have a question.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, you talked about a rather extensive timeline.
Yes.
Putting all those pieces together in a linear fashion, but
Mhm.
I think it's been the assumption of this commission, and maybe it's a question for Mr. Cook, that this is something that we were working towards getting on the November election docket. I assume, is that inaccurate
That's the target.
goal?
Absolutely.
That's up to them. They don't have to do that.
They
They
don't
have
have
up
to.
to 15 months. Once the report is finalized by the appointing authority, in this case the Board of Selectmen, they have up to 15 months to send it to referendum if they choose to. But the timeline you're on now will give plenty of opportunity to put it on in November if they choose to do that. And, that's a judgment they'll make.
That was the goal of this schedule and of the schedule they originally provided, but as council
Well, I
says,
just wanted to
they have
confirm
some
that.
flexibility.
The other question would be, let's say they stretch it out to the 15 months, and now you have a new Board of Selectmen. Does it get resubmitted, or does it just kind of get passed along?
No, once the Board of Selectmen takes an action, that action's binding
Okay,
as an action of the Board of Selectmen.
thank you. Any other questions?
What could be a bit of a complication is your draft has an effective date that is less than 15 months from the date of your submission. But I don't think that's going to be a realistic issue. I think every effort will be made. If it does get sent to referendum, it makes logical sense to do it in November. You'll have the broadest possible turnout in this November. I would think it's a presidential year. It's usually the high water mark for turnout.
Okay. Anybody else? No? Okay, thank you, Buck. Okay, we are now going to turn to the public. What I'm going to ask you to do is if you limit your remarks to 5 minutes. If you find that you really need something longer than that, we will go to a second round later on. But this way we can let everybody at least get an opportunity to speak, okay, beforehand. If one of the members of the committee wants to ask a question of you once you've made your speech or your comments, it will not count against the time that you've been allotted. So if you raise an issue in the middle and they want to clarify something, you'll get a little extended time in sound. Okay? Would you like to speak, Ms. Cook?
I would love to speak,
Please.
to have this opportunity to speak to you. Joan Coe, 26 Whitcomb Drive. I am pleased that this charter reflects the town manager as the CEO of Simsbury. My concern is the charter is a hybrid with a first selectman and board of selectmen. Most successful town manager governments have an elected council and the chairman is chosen from the members with no salary. If Simsbury is going to vote for a town manager as the CEO, we shouldn't cloak the legislative body as the Board of Selectmen, keeping the old terminology that is deceptive, and continue to pay the first selectman a salary. Simsbury residents can look to Farmington and Avon with council manager form of government that has worked well for years with a lower mill rate, costing less for comparable houses. I would suggest eliminating all references to a first selectman and a board of selectmen and place town council in its place. Section 501, appointment of a town manager. There should be a residency requirement for the town manager required in the charter, having that person as a Simsbury resident interacting with residents on a daily basis. It is important for the executive officer, town manager, to live under the same regulations, pay the taxes to the town, and become accountable to the residents. This should be included in the charter. Why in Section 501, quote, At the time of appointment, said manager need not be a resident of the town of the state of Connecticut, but the town manager shall reside in the town during tenure of office, end quote. This was taken out of the original wording. Why? This paragraph should be included in the charter. It should be noted that 3 past first selectmen were in favor of having a town manager, addressing the need for a professional town manager to mitigate the risks to the community with rules, regulations, and mandates that must be followed and managed on a daily basis. There is a cost benefit to the taxpayers when the town is managed professionally. Having the charter continue with the first selectman and board of selectmen gives the impression that the charter is adding another layer to the government with additional costs. This is not true. Since the town manager will eliminate the position of Director of Administrative Services and the salary for first selectman, leaving enough money to pay a professional town manager. A seasoned professional town manager would not be interested in working for a hybrid government. There are many charters, including Farmington, that have a council manager form of government for decades that we can institute for Simsbury. Why has this commission refused to have a tried and tested form of government with a town manager council, not a hybrid that detracts from the position? If this charter is not approved by the residents, the present charter would remain, leaving an apparent illegal government in place, and another charter revision commission would have to be convened to make substantive changes to bring it into compliance. The charter as presented is a hybrid form of town manager council that might not be accepted by the residents and diminish the ability to hire a high-quality professional town manager. I urge this commission to rethink many of the issues I have addressed and incorporate these changes into the charter. And all of my comments will be posted on Simsbury Patch, Simsbury Forum Topics, Twitter at JoanCo, and newsfeed on Facebook, in case you didn't get the whole story. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Coe. Any other members of the public who'd like to address this? Any other members of the public? Please, in the back.
Good evening. I'm John Schaefer, 16 Lost Brook Road. I just have a question. I've been hearing about this for, I don't know, 10 years, 15 years, whatever it is going on about we need a town manager. But yet I still haven't heard a discussion of pros and cons. It seems to be sort of taken at face value that a professional town manager is going to run things better than a first selectman. And I just wondered if this group in your deliberations, did you have actual studies that anybody had done to look at the other towns in Connecticut or across the country that have town managers and find out, do they really run better? Do councils really work better than having a first selectman oversee it? And I understand from the timeline that we just heard that maybe I'm ahead of it as far as hearing the pros and cons in the paper, but maybe that you're part of it, as part of the committee's work, you're not really informing the public yet, and that'll happen when we go to vote. But I've just been hearing about this for years and years and don't really hear too much about what's good and what's bad. Thank you.
Any other members of the public who would like to, please?
Good evening. Mr. Schaefer made a good question. To the best of my knowledge, there's never been a study as to the effect of a town manager. Miss Glassman is here. She served as first selectman. It's my understanding from Dr. Rinaldi that when she ran the first time, because she was looking to see, was short on experience and long on desire to serve, that she spoke to, and correct me if I'm wrong, she spoke to people that were town managers or that had retired town managers to find out more or less how to run a town accordingly. And she's here tonight, she can comment on it. But that's what I heard from Dr. Rinaldi. Now, the first question I have is, I get the feeling that this was orchestrated for the privileged in the town, the political privilege. And a lot of people deny that we have political privilege, but we have it. Believe me, we have it. There are people that are afforded privilege at council meetings, and Ms. Cole mentioned it at the last Board of Selectmen meeting. She went into a lengthy explanation of the privileged in town that are getting special services and special treatment. And I can't think any other way, because I happen to notice that the constables were omitted from the last charter. They were taken out entirely. And at that point, this charter was voted on, and Mrs. Glassman didn't even attend to the vote. The last charter, in my opinion, was illegal. The charter we're operating on right now is illegal, and the charter was voted on by the Board of Selectmen, and at that meeting, that vote was taken. Ms. Glassman was not there for the vote. You could check I was there when the vote was taken. And I know who changed their votes, and she was not there. Getting back to we've had the history of Simsbury for 350 years. The town of Simsbury has had a constable. It goes back to the French and Indian War. They've had a constable. And it's history. And for some reason or other, to accommodate, in my opinion, the privilege of the town, the state marshals or the sheriffs, they were taken out. And to my knowledge, they never served legal papers in the town. It was on the books, it was history, so they weren't any threat to the state marshal or the sheriffs. And incidentally, these are the same sheriffs where the top sheriff went to prison, and then Al Rio went to prison. And so they don't have a very good history. And why they were taken out was just to accommodate, here again, the privileged. And getting back, I lobbied to have it restored, and my lobby fell on deaf ears. And now we have the added expense where the governor and the legislature are sending messages to the town. You're not going to get the money you used to get from us. They've cut the educational budget already. And they haven't come to an agreement. And they're not going to come to an agreement. So why go into the added expense of a town manager? You're going to pay the selectman, first selectman, then you're going to pay Mr. Cook, then you're going to pay the town manager. Where are we getting all this money? And like Miss Glassman used to say all the time, well, we're going to get a grant. Well, let me tell you something, people. Both you people and the town committees, you're not going to get the grants anymore. I talked to somebody the other day, you're not going to get the grants.
Excuse me, Mr. Kalishman, could you
I'm
begin to
finished?
wrap up,
Fine,
please?
okay.
Thank you.
So in wrapping up, in concluding, I would like for this board to pack their bag and discontinue their study and do not submit your recommendations. And let's do the charter that we have presently. We don't need a new charter. We don't need the added expense. And the people that are here, I urge you that in event they override the request of the people don't want this.
Mr. Kalishman, please.
Okay, they don't want it, vote it down. Vote no when it comes to a vote. Or contact your Board of Selectmen and tell your select people to vote no, to reject it, to send it
Thank
back.
you, Mr. Kalishman. Any other members of the public who would like to address the committee?
You want to take your
Oh, thank you.
Please.
Don't let me forget my sign.
don't step on the phone.
Sorry about that.
Watch out for the cord.
Yeah.
David, I think you have Bob's phone.
Oh, is that you? Sorry about that.
That's that one.
You have two
I can
phones.
send you the bill in the month if you.
Hey, this one's worth more. You owe me some change. Could I ask a question first?
Certainly. Please just identify yourself for the record.
My name is Dave Balboni. I live at 13 Fox Den Road in West Simsbury. Just a little background. I came to town in 1955, the day after the Great Flood, which not many people were here for that, I don't think. At that time, there were about 4,800 people in the town, and now we've got 24,000, give or take. But before I go on, I'd like to ask, do they need a quorum for this hearing?
I don't think, they're not, you can't take an action without a quorum. I think they can proceed with the public hearing in the absence of a quorum.
But they can't take any action afterwards to push it forward.
No.
So my question is, are we going to do this again?
Yes. The commission has an obligation, through you, Mr. Chairman, the commission has an obligation to act on their report, and they'll have to convene the commission with at least a quorum in order to do that.
I think the answer is, we're not going, unless somebody else shows up tonight to make a quorum, we're not going to take any action on the report this evening, and we'll have another meeting on it. We will not necessarily have another public hearing. We're hearing the public
You
now.
just take action.
But we don't need to take, we can't take an action tonight on the committee report itself without a quorum.
So the second thing that shows on the agenda this would culminate it. You wouldn't take that?
If there's no quorum, we won't have
Okay.
to do it. Correct.
Okay, well, I guess I should continue then, eh?
But I'll let you start now.
Okay. I have three main points that I'd like to make. The first one, and the most important one, is the town manager. And I strongly advocate that we have a town manager form of government. And what you've proposed with a lot of hard work, lots of meetings, I think is, oh, we got another person. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Someone out looking for one more? No? Anyway, I really think we should proceed. I think the most important factor that's come forth in watching all these sessions on SCTV is the fact that we've had 3 of prior First Select ladies or men who all are in accord, 2 from one party and 1 from another party, and they feel that we need a town manager. I personally really feel that we need it because this is like, I think the first charter was in 1972 or 1974. And the town manager concept didn't really start to come into vogue, if you will, for the last three meetings that we had. My second point is the Economic Development Commission. I've been a member of the Economic Development Commission for over 50 years, and we've had some good times, we've had some bad times. The way you've proposed in the charter to have it be accountable, if you will, to the town manager, I think degrades the status of the EDC. I think it should be a commission of 5 appointed, and it should be appointed and be responsible to the new Board of Select People. And an ad hoc committee doesn't have to meet every week or every month, but I think that would be a way to handle that. And it seems to me that that commission should be composed primarily of businessmen. but that's just my own personal feeling about it. The third point I'd like to make is kind of not necessarily germane to this, but the question about the famous brouhaha that we had in the conflict back two years ago, I guess. And we now have a lady serving as the first selectwoman, Lisa Hevner, who I believe is receiving $75,000 a year compensation. Prior to that, I believe Mrs. Glassman's salary was $115,000. I can't remember precisely. It seems to me that this board, not this board, but the Board of Selectmen should immediately, regardless of the outcome of this, put the salary of Mrs. Hefner back up to $115,000. It just doesn't make any sense to me. It's not equitable. It's not even reasonable that she should serve in that capacity. And I think that the Board of Selectmen, which is not in your jurisdiction, should look at that issue. It would be good. Hopefully it would mend some of the hurt of the past and only be fair to that lady. So those are my three major points. And I'd just like to say that wisdom tends, they think, to come with age. But we all know that sometimes it comes with a little bit of lack of comprehension. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Badley. Any of the other members of the public who have any comments? Any other members of the public? No? Public hearing is concluded then. Thank you all.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.